across the European Union, we see the dark fascism reviving. Will it come to Canada, or is it already here? Joining us now via Skype is our friend Andrew Lawton from TNC.news. Andrew, I know I'm sounding quite dramatic and maybe even a little sad, but the people who were in Germany in the 30s were the most educated, enlightened, rational, scientific thinkers of Europe. Germany was the home of culture and learning and literature and poetry and music. These were not Taliban illiterates. These were the leaders of culture. And they embraced, if not at first, eventually, the worst fascism known. Is it possible that it could be happening again?
One thing that I think is so paramount, and you touched on it there, Ezra, is that you need a population that's willing to go along with this. And we oftentimes, especially on the right, tend to look at enumerated rights and freedoms as being the be-all and end-all, the U.S. Bill of Rights, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms for all its flaws, and similar charters and constitutions around the world. But none of these freedoms matter in the least if you don't have a culture that is committed to upholding them. And I think you've acknowledged the biggest danger here, which is not that we have governments that are resorting to what I think are objectively tyrannical measures when it comes to the auspices of public health, but that they're doing it with a population that is not only complacent, but in many respects encouraging and welcoming it.
You know, there's so many similarities. The Nazi propaganda referred to Jews as dirty, as carrying disease, of Untermenschen. And here we see, and we learned from Blacklock's recently, that Justin Trudeau had polling prior to the last election that told him if he demonized the unvaccinated as unclean threats to the rest of society, that would resonate with a sizable number of voters. I mean, one is unvaccinated, one is Jewish. Obviously, that's a difference, but the demonization of sectors of society, I mean, I guess it's true you can try and improve a culture over time, but at the end of the day, we're all sinners. We all have these psychological blind spots. There's hatred and fear in all of us, and this is a reminder of how quickly a population can be weaponized against itself.
Indeed, and I think that's where the comparison is an important one. I don't go so far as to, generally speaking, in my commentary, liken anything to the Holocaust, because the final goal here is different. We're not talking about a government agenda on extermination, but we are talking about a systematic delegitimization and segregation and denial of people's rights. And the thing in Austria that I find so fascinating here, and I should say I was actually just 2 weeks and a day ago, I got back from Austria. I was there on a holiday, and I was sitting in a cafe, and I was chatting with my wife, and we were remarking about how normal it all felt there compared to life in Canada, life in Ontario specifically. And it's amazing what a difference a few weeks can make. That place that was, again, feeling relatively free, you had to use a vaccine passport, but you could also use a negative test or proof of acquired immunity. Not perfect, but better than the systems that we have in place in Canadian provinces. And then you go forward a couple of weeks, and we're talking about mandatory vaccination, legitimately the threat of jail time. The threat of jail time, according to The Guardian, for people who by February are not vaccinated. This is the only country in the world, apart from Turkmenistan, which is generally not the company in which I like to find myself for matters of public policy, the only Western, supposedly democratic country in the world to go this far. And as we know with Europe, it's typically a case of them moving in packs. Germany is already acknowledging that it is not going to take anything off the table, which is not exactly a comforting line from a German official for obvious reasons, and numerous other countries as well that are seeing a demand from the WHO to increase, to ramp up their measures. And yesterday's conspiracy theory is today's public policy. I said that on your show a couple of months ago, and here we are with a vaccine mandate in place in a Western nation.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.